Candide, Voltaire, 1759. Candide, published by Voltaire in 1759, is one of the Enlightenment's wittiest and sharpest critiques. Disguised as a wild travel adventure, it delivers a biting philosophical attack beneath its chaos and comedy. The tale follows Candide, a naive young man taught by his tutor Pangloss that all is for the best in the best of all possible worlds. Armed with this optimism, he endures calamity after calamity. War, massacres, earthquakes, the Inquisition, betrayals, and disastrous journeys across Europe and South America. The brilliance lies in its dark humor. Everything collapses, yet Candide clings to Pangloss's doctrine. Voltaire targets the optimism of thinkers like Leibniz, who argued suffering ultimately served a divine plan. Having witnessed horrors like the Lisbon earthquake, Voltaire mocks this view, exposing the absurdity of justifying misery with philosophy. By the end, Candide abandons lofty ideals for grounded wisdom. True meaning lies in modest work and common decency, summed up in the lesson that we must cultivate our garden. The impact was immense. Banned for its irreverence, Candide became one of the Enlightenment's most powerful literary weapons. It dismantled naive optimism and urged readers to face reality with clarity, humor, and practicality. Even today, it endures as both a hilarious adventure and a timeless challenge to philosophies that excuse suffering as inherently good. Notes from Underground, Fyodor Dostoevsky, 1864. In 1864, Fyodor Dostoevsky published Notes from Underground, a short novel that feels less like a story than being trapped inside the restless mind of one man. Known only as the Underground Man, he delivers a bitter monologue about his isolation, failures, and rebellion against the optimism and logic of his age. Living in self-imposed exile, he lashes out at society and himself. He rejects the rationalist belief that human behavior can be perfected through progress or prediction. Instead, he insists that the soul hides darker truths, vanity, spite, and even the self-destructive urge to rebel simply to prove one's freedom. His existence is not heroic but petty, contradictory, and painfully honest. That is Dostoevsky's point. Humans never fit neatly into formulas or utopian blueprints. The novel's core theme is that even in a perfect society, people might still sabotage it, because to obey reason completely would erase the irrational spark that makes us human. The Underground Man would rather wound himself, even ruin his own happiness, than surrender freedom to deterministic systems. The impact of Notes from Underground was profound. Less polished than Dostoevsky's later masterpieces, it nonetheless planted the seeds of existentialism, foreshadowing Kafka, Nietzsche, and Sartre. In raw form, it reveals a paradox. Humans often choose what's worse for them simply to declare, "I am free." To this day, the Underground Man remains both frustrating and unforgettable, a mirror of our contradictions and a reminder that beneath reason lies something stubborn, chaotic, and defiantly human. Crime and Punishment, Fyodor Dostoevsky, 1866. Published in 1866, Fyodor Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment is his most intense psychological novel. At its center is Rodion Raskolnikov, a poor former student in St. Petersburg who conceives a chilling theory that great men, like Napoleon, stand above ordinary morality. To test it, he murders an old pawnbroker, justifying the act as removing someone useless while elevating himself as exceptional. Almost immediately, however, he unravels. What begins as a calculated assertion of superiority collapses into guilt, paranoia, and alienation. He shifts constantly between justification and self-hatred, never finding peace. Dostoevsky plunges us inside his feverish mind, a realm as claustrophobic as it is tragic. The novel becomes a profound meditation on morality, conscience, and redemption. It asks, can we truly step beyond good and evil, or is there a moral law within us that rebels against transgression? The answer comes through Raskolnikov's eventual confession and his slow path to redemption, not through intellect, but through suffering, humility, and above all, love embodied by the selfless Sonia. The impact of Crime and Punishment has been vast. Though structured like a psychological thriller with interrogations and suspense, it doubles as a spiritual trial. More than a crime story, it became a meditation on the human soul, influencing psychology, moral philosophy, and literature for generations. In the end, Raskolnikov's fate leaves an unforgettable lesson. Freedom is not found in breaking laws or asserting superiority, but in facing one's conscience and embracing redemption. The Brothers Karamazov, Fyodor Dostoevsky, 1880. Dostoevsky's final and perhaps greatest novel, The Brothers Karamazov, 1880, is both a murder mystery and a sweeping exploration of faith, doubt, and morality. At its center is the turbulent Karamazov family, the debauched father, Fyodor, and his three very different sons. Dmitri, the eldest, is driven by passion and reckless desire. Ivan, the intellectual, wrestles with reason, skepticism, and the agonizing question of whether God can exist in a world of suffering. Alyosha, the youngest, is gentle, spiritual, and a living embodiment of Christian virtue. Together, the brothers represent the warring forces of sensuality, doubt, and faith within the human soul. When their father is murdered, suspicion falls on Dmitri, but the novel becomes much more than a whodunit. It dives into the core problems of good and evil, justice and injustice, and the haunting challenge Ivan voices: if God does not exist, is everything permitted? Dostoevsky refuses easy answers, instead immersing readers in dialogue, tension, and contradiction. Timeless themes run through its pages: the struggle with suffering, the limits of logic, and the search for redemption. In unforgettable sections such as The Grand Inquisitor, Dostoevsky stages one of literature's sharpest arguments about freedom, authority, and faith. The impact has been monumental. The novel shaped thinkers from Freud to Nietzsche and inspired writers like Kafka and Camus. It endures as both a family saga of passion, violence, and betrayal, and a spiritual trial questioning the foundations of ethics. Ultimately, The Brothers Karamazov offers no definitive solution. Instead, it leaves us inside the brothers' conflict, suggesting that the struggle between reason, doubt, and faith is itself the essence of being human. Thus spoke Zarathustra, Friedrich Nietzsche, 1883 to 1885. Friedrich Nietzsche's Thus Spoke Zarathustra, 1883 to 1885, is unlike most novels, not truly a novel at all, but part epic poem, part philosophy, and part sermon. It introduces Zarathustra, a solitary prophet descending from his mountain retreat to deliver a radical vision to humanity. Central to this vision is the idea of the Übermensch, or overman, who transcends conventional morality, overcomes despair, and creates new values in the wake of collapsing old ones. Zarathustra declares the famous words, "God is dead, not as triumph, but as warning." With Europe's traditional religious and moral frameworks crumbling, nothing obvious stood ready to replace them. Without new meaning, humanity risked sinking into nihilism, the belief that life is pointless. Through parables, poetic sermons, and puzzling allegories, Zarathustra calls on listeners, and us, to embrace self-overcoming, reject herd mentality, and live boldly in a world without divine guarantees. The style is lofty, playful, and deliberately strange, as if Nietzsche aimed to write scripture for a post-religious age. The impact has been immense. Though challenging at first glance, Zarathustra became central to existentialism, shaping Sartre, Camus, and Heidegger, while influencing literature, art, and psychology. Its images, the Übermensch, the eternal return, and the death of God, remain some of philosophy's most provocative ideas. Where Voltaire mocked optimism through satire and Dostoevsky probed morality through drama, Nietzsche fuses philosophy with myth and poetry. Thus Spoke Zarathustra endures as a difficult but electrifying call to shape meaning for ourselves in a world without certainties. The Stranger, Albert Camus, 1942. Published in 1942, Albert Camus' The Stranger is one of the most famous and unsettling novels of the 20th century. It follows Massault, an ordinary office worker in French colonial Algeria, whose life is marked by detachment. His indifference is striking from the start. Even at his mother's funeral, he shows little grief, noting only the heat and his discomfort. Soon after, this passivity collides with violence. On a blazing day at the beach, in a dreamlike daze, Massault kills a man with almost no provocation. The act feels meaningless, and that is precisely Camus' point. It is not about motive, but the absurdity of life itself. Events occur without higher design, while humans still hunger for meaning. At his trial, the focus shifts from the crime to his character, his lack of remorse and refusal to feign emotions. Society cannot accept his honesty, condemning him as much for indifference as for murder. Facing execution, Massault embraces the absurd, the truth that life has no ultimate purpose, yet within that emptiness lies radical freedom, the chance to live authentically without illusions. The impact was enormous. Written during war and occupation, The Stranger became the defining work of absurdism, capturing a world where old certainties had collapsed. Its brevity and stark style, quiet, flat, but haunting, make it one of modern philosophy's most powerful novels. Even today, its closing scene compels readers to confront mortality, freedom, and what it means to accept life without appeal to higher authority. The Plague, Albert Camus, 1947. Albert Camus' The Plague, published in 1947, begins with an ordinary Algerian city, Oran, suddenly struck by an outbreak of bubonic plague. At first, officials downplay the danger, but when death multiplies, the entire city is sealed off. What follows is not just the story of disease, but a deeper exploration of how people respond when stripped of normal life. Denial, fear, selfishness, but also courage and solidarity. The novel's central character, Dr. Ruse, chooses to fight the plague tirelessly, not because he believes in ultimate triumph, but because, as he sees it, human dignity demands resistance, regardless of the outcome. In this way, Camus frames the epidemic as an allegory for the human condition under the absurd, a world where suffering often has no higher purpose, yet where meaning can still be forged through action and compassion. Published in the aftermath of World War II, readers immediately recognized another layer. The plague is a metaphor for fascism and oppression spreading across Europe, an evil that ordinary people resisted not with grand heroes, but through steady, collective effort. At its heart, the plague insists that even in the face of inevitable defeat, solidarity and moral responsibility are what give life its truest value. The impact of Camus' novel has only grown. During modern pandemics, its pages have found new resonance, reminding us of the same timeless truth. While we cannot escape suffering, we can choose how to confront it, through denial and isolation, or through courage, humility, and shared struggle. The plague endures as both a story of disease and a powerful parable of what it means to be human together in times of crisis. Nausea, Jean-Paul Sartre, 1938. Jean-Paul Sartre's Nausea, 1938, is often considered the first major existentialist novel. It follows Antoine Roquin, a historian in a coastal town, who becomes overwhelmed not by events but by the raw fact of existence itself. Objects, people, even his own body appear strange and alien. The mundane, a tree root, a stone, his hands, triggers a profound sense of nausea. This is more than disgust. It is confrontation with the sheer there-ness of the world. Sartre uses Roquin to illustrate his idea that existence precedes essence, that things and people exist before having any predetermined meaning. Stripped of illusions, Roquin is thrown into the vertigo of freedom. With no destiny or higher plan, life is what we choose to make of it. That freedom is exhilarating but also unbearable, even nauseating. The novel is fragmented and inward, told through diary entries. Instead of plot-driven action, what grips the reader is Roquin's struggle with meaninglessness and his recognition that despite absurdity, we remain responsible for creating value. The impact was immediate and enduring. Nausea translated Sartre's philosophy into emotional experience, turning existentialism from abstract theory into a suffocating personal reality. Later thinkers and writers saw in it a new kind of literature, one that exposed the emptiness of inherited values while demanding radical freedom. Today, Nausea remains a definitive expression of existentialism, resonating with the anxious, the restless, and anyone who has stared too long at life and felt both its absurdity and its terrifying openness. Steppenwolf, Hermann Hesse, 1927. Published in 1927, Hermann Hesse's Steppenwolf is one of the most haunting examinations of inner conflict in modern literature. Its protagonist, Harry Haller, is a middle-aged intellectual torn between two selves. The respectable bourgeois man who goes through the motions of society and a wild, untamable wolf of the steppes, driven by passion, instinct, and rebellion. Haller despises the emptiness of middle-class routine, yet cannot fully surrender to his darker impulses. This painful divide leaves him alienated, bitter, and suicidal. His life shifts when he meets new companions, especially the free-spirited Hermine, who guide him into a surreal world of music, love, and the enigmatic magic theater, a dreamlike realm where he confronts the fragmented pieces of his psyche. The central theme is identity. We are never just one self, but many selves in conflict, and freedom means embracing that multiplicity rather than suppressing it. Hesse portrays alienation as both a personal crisis and a symptom of a society that stifles instinct and creativity. Beneath the despair lies a quieter search for transcendence, integration, laughter, and a harmony beyond the split between man and wolf. Though misunderstood at first, the novel's impact grew. By the 1960s, it became iconic within counterculture, speaking to readers disillusioned with conformity and hungry for spiritual freedom. Blending psychology, mysticism, and existential angst, Steppenwolf worked as a guidebook for authenticity beyond social norms. To this day, Haller's struggle resonates with anyone torn between roles or desires, reminding us that wholeness, paradoxically, comes from embracing our contradictions. Siddhartha, Hermann Hesse, 1922. Published in 1922, Hermann Hesse's Siddhartha is a luminous tale of spiritual searching set in ancient India. It follows Siddhartha, the gifted son of a Brahmin priest, who leaves behind a privileged life of ritual and learning to seek a deeper, more personal understanding of truth. Accompanied at first by his friend Govinda, he sets off on a journey that will lead him through wealth, love, despair, and finally, wisdom. Siddhartha first embraces asceticism, practicing rigorous self-denial, but finds it barren. He then plunges into worldly pleasures. He becomes wealthy, indulges in luxuries, and discovers passion through his relationship with the courtesan Kamala. Yet this too brings disillusionment. Success and desire leave him empty inside. Broken, he turns away again, only to find unexpected peace living with a humble ferryman by the river. The river itself becomes the novel's great symbol, timeless, ever-flowing, containing all beginnings and endings at once. Here, Siddhartha learns that enlightenment is not a single destination or narrow doctrine, but the unity of all experience, joy and suffering, indulgence and renunciation, love and loss. Unlike his friend Govinda, who devotes himself to following the Buddha, Siddhartha discovers that no teacher can hand down ultimate truth. It must be lived, felt, and personally realized. The impact of Siddhartha has been extraordinary. Blending Eastern philosophy with Western narrative style, Hesse made Buddhist and Hindu concepts accessible to Western readers at a time when interest in Eastern spirituality was growing. Later, the novel became especially influential among the counterculture of the 1960s, inspiring seekers of self-discovery and nonconformity. Today, Siddhartha endures as one of the great spiritual novels, a timeless reminder that wisdom cannot be inherited or learned secondhand. It must be sought in the fullness of life itself, where every moment, like the river, flows toward understanding. Brave New World, Aldous Huxley, 1932. Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, published in 1932, imagines a futuristic society that seems, at first glance, utopian. There is no war, no poverty, no visible suffering. People are healthy, entertained, and always content, thanks to genetic engineering, social conditioning, and a cheerful little drug called soma, which erases unease with a swallow. But beneath this perfect exterior lies the real horror. Individuality has been sacrificed for stability. Children are bred in laboratories, sorted into rigid castes, and taught from birth to love their roles. Art, literature, religion, the sources of struggle and meaning, have all been stripped away in favor of shallow pleasures and mindless conformity. In this world, people don't rebel because they don't even realize they're missing freedom. Into this society comes John, the savage, raised outside the system with Shakespeare as his moral compass. Through his eyes, we see the cost of comfort without truth. John recoils at a society built on distraction and pleasure, crying out for passion, struggle, and the right to suffer, to live fully as a human being. His tragic story underscores the novel's unsettling question: is happiness still valuable when it's engineered and bought at the expense of freedom? The themes of Brave New World cut directly into modern anxieties. Technology versus humanity, truth versus comfort, the seduction of pleasure at the cost of individuality. The impact has been immense. Alongside Orwell's 1984, Huxley's vision stands as one of the great dystopian warnings of the modern era. If Orwell warned us about governments controlling us through fear and pain, Huxley warned of control through pleasure and distraction. A world where people surrender freedom not because they are oppressed, but because they are entertained. Even today, Brave New World forces readers to ask, in a society obsessed with comfort and convenience, are we choosing happiness or quietly giving up our humanity? 1984, George Orwell, 1949. George Orwell's 1984, published in 1949, is perhaps the most haunting political novel ever written. It takes place in Oceania, a totalitarian state where every detail of life is controlled by the party and its ever-present leader, known as Big Brother. Citizens are watched at all times. Language itself is reshaped through newspeak, and even private thoughts are policed by the terrifying thought police. At the center is Winston Smith, a weary bureaucrat quietly rebelling against the suffocating machinery of the state. He keeps a secret diary, begins a forbidden love affair and dares to believe in truth, memory, and personal freedom. But in Orwell's bleak vision, resistance does not lead to victory. It leads to brutal betrayal. Winston is captured, tortured, and ultimately broken. By the end, even his innermost self is conquered as he learns to love Big Brother. The novel's themes are chillingly precise. The manipulation of truth, the weaponization of language, and the terrifying extent of surveillance as a tool of power. Orwell shows that oppression doesn't just mean controlling bodies. It means reshaping minds until truth itself becomes whatever the state declares it to be. The impact of 1984 has been enormous. It permanently shaped our vocabulary. Big Brother, Orwellian, and doublethink are terms we still use to describe censorship, propaganda, and authoritarian power. While deeply rooted in the Cold War anxieties of the late 1940s, its relevance has only grown in the digital age, as concerns over privacy, misinformation, and mass surveillance echo the warnings Orwell laid out decades ago. The Trial, Franz Kafka, 1925. Franz Kafka's The Trial, published posthumously in 1925, tells the story of Joseph K., an ordinary bank clerk who is suddenly arrested one morning without explanation. From the start, no one tells him what crime he is accused of, and no matter how hard he searches for answers, he meets only with opaque bureaucracy, endless offices, and officials who seem powerful but never actually clarify anything. As Joseph K. struggles to defend himself, he becomes trapped in a web of hearings, vague documents, and shadowy authority figures. The more he protests, the more guilty he seems. His life becomes consumed by the trial, until his own sense of self unravels. He ends as he began, condemned without understanding, executed like a dog, as Kafka writes in one of literature's most chilling conclusions. The novel's themes are stark and unsettling. The Trial captures the absurdity of authority, where individuals are crushed by systems too vast and impersonal to comprehend. It echoes the anxiety of modern life, alienation, loss of control, and the feeling that justice is more performance than truth. There is no clear moral compass here, only a nightmare of endless rules that never resolve into meaning. The impact of the novel has been massive. In fact, we now use the word Kafkaesque to describe situations where life feels like an endless maze of surreal injustice. Confusing, illogical, but disturbingly familiar. While Kafka wrote from his own experiences of suffocating bureaucracy in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, his work resonates everywhere systems overwhelm individuals. The Trial remains one of the defining novels of the 20th century, a parable of modern alienation, reminding us how fragile justice becomes when institutions lose sight of humanity. The Myth of Sisyphus, Albert Camus, 1942. Albert Camus' The Myth of Sisyphus, published in 1942, is technically a philosophical essay, but it reads like literature, and its central image is one of the most famous in modern thought. Camus begins with a blunt claim. There's only one truly serious philosophical question: whether life is worth living. The challenge he identifies is the experience of the absurd, the clash between our longing for meaning and the universe's silence in return. To explore this, Camus retells the Greek myth of Sisyphus, the man condemned by the gods to push a massive boulder up a hill, only to watch it roll back down again, repeating the futile ordeal for eternity. For Camus, Sisyphus is the perfect symbol of human existence. Life often feels repetitive, difficult, and ultimately without cosmic purpose. But Camus resists despair. For him, the answer is not suicide, nor pretending meaning exists where it doesn't, but embracing the struggle itself. By imagining Sisyphus happy, Camus shows that even in futility, we can claim dignity, freedom, and even joy through defiance. The themes of the myth of Sisyphus express the heart of Camus' philosophy of absurdism. Meaning is not given to us. It must be created moment by moment in how we live, love, and face obstacles. The impact of the essay has been enormous. It has become a touchstone not only in philosophy, but in literature, psychology, and even everyday conversation. Its concluding idea, "one must imagine Sisyphus happy," has been endlessly quoted, inspiring readers to endure suffering not with resignation, but with a kind of creative rebellion. In the end, Camus' Sisyphus still pushes his rock. The situation doesn't change, but in choosing his attitude, he turns punishment into triumph, teaching us how to face life's absurdity with courage and grace. Atlas Shrugged, Ayn Rand, 1957. Published in 1957, Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged is both an epic novel and a manifesto for her philosophy, objectivism. It imagines a United States where government regulation and collectivist policies steadily strangle innovation, productivity, and ambition. At the center of the story is Dagny Taggart, a railroad executive desperately trying to keep her company alive as society collapses under mediocrity and bureaucracy. But what makes Atlas Shrugged unique is the mysterious disappearance of the nation's great industrialists, inventors, and entrepreneurs. One by one, the brightest minds withdraw their talents from society, leaving behind chaos and decay. The force behind this strike of genius is John Galt, a figure who embodies Rand's ideals: reason, independence, and the conviction that the individual's mind is the true engine of progress. His famous demand is simple: stop sacrificing the creative few for the mediocre many. The themes of the novel are bold and uncompromising. Rand champions individualism, capitalism, and rational self-interest as the highest virtues, while attacking collectivism, state control, and altruism as corrosive forces. In her vision, the pursuit of one's own happiness and achievement is not selfishness in the negative sense, but the moral foundation of a flourishing society. The impact of Atlas Shrugged has been immense and polarizing. For millions of readers, it is a life-changing text, elevating the importance of reason, freedom, and enterprise. For critics, it is viewed as dogmatic or extreme, a utopian defense of unrestrained capitalism. Regardless of stance, its influence on politics, economics, and libertarian thought is undeniable. Leaders in business and government continue to cite it as a guiding force. Atlas Shrugged remains one of the most debated novels of modern times. Not simply a story of trains and tycoons, but a dramatic stage for Rand's core message: that the individual should never live merely for the sake of others, and that civilization rises only when free minds are left to think.